know the brownstone that Dr. King lived in? It sits on the hi-hat where Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk, used to play. It was across the street from NAACP, where there's absolutely no recognition of all of the African-American scholars that met there, that dealt with racism and gentrification in the 60s and the 40s. It was put there, and this is why I say she belongs there. It was done intentionally because it's surrounded with African-American history. And so for us, it's disrespectful to say. This needs to go national. We want to raise the visibility of Harriet Tubman being put on the $20 bill. We want everybody who can reach out to any organizations, preservations that are related to Harriet Tubman, let them know that this historic building is scheduled to be demolished. I have a friend who is actually friends with a descendant of Harriet Tubman from Maryland. He's trying to gather up his family because he says one of their goals is to protect things named after their descendant, Harriet Tubman. And so, if USCS was really trying to serve black and brown kids, they would not treat the black and brown adults. 6 nonprofits, you have to understand what that means. 6 nonprofits are about to lose their headquarters. For TDC,
and the services that
there's hundreds of services. No one cares. We have ballet programs for our girls. Not one person has said, what about the 6 nonprofits? As a matter of fact, they tell us, oh, you have no rights because you're tenants. And I said, you know what? I said to my boss, just like we won the first case up for tenants in the 60s, we're going to have to win the first case for nonprofits in 2019. You know, the interesting thing is we were given our 90-day notice to vacate on the same day that USCS was doing their neighborhood gala. If that did not send a message that you are no longer part of this neighborhood, I don't know who wouldn't see that. Stay with us. We have close to 50 staff. We have programs. Lily has programs. Mac has programs. Primetimers have programs. And not one person, not one politician has gotten the nerve to get up and say we need to stop this gentrification. Because if we're gentrified, who's next? Everybody.
And then London's bridge comes falling down as the emperor's clothes are exposed, or better yet, the Holland Tunnel comes crashing down, and the bear comes bearing down like a bill collector with Ralph and Poindexter to repossess all credit card debts. And then all bets are off, because finally you can make $1 out of 15 cents, because it's only worth 15 cents. And so they jack the rent, or then they cut your pay, or they might just simply send you.
I'm Jack Drury. I'm here because Tito Jackson at church yesterday told me about this meeting. I used to be Tito's Sunday school teacher. I was Tito's Sunday school teacher at Union United Methodist. And as some of you know, we're a church that goes back to 1796 as a organization that started on the Beacon Hill, the African Meeting House Church. We came to that corner in 1949. We've been there 79 years. They've now built the Tubman Park and the statue there. So that, in essence, is now the Harriet Tubman corridor between that statue and the building. And I was aware of what Val was talking about, because that was one of my questions, because you know how one of those programs talks about the way to make society better is to kill all the lawyers. So I know there's 3 or 4 lawyers here tonight, and what Tito told me was that he thought that there was a restrictive covenant that ran with the deed of the Tubman House that would prevent it from being conveyed to a private entity.
Ask a question. Did you say that the city council voted to demolish the building?
Not the city council, the city of Boston voted already to have the building demolished.
But who was that, the BPDA?
I have to check, I will
Now,
check.
does that start with the mayor?
It's funny you should say that. I'm good friends with FISA, and every time, and I let her know about the I Am Harriet group, and she's like, well, it's not the mayor's fault, that's BPDA. City's Marty Walsh is over BPDA, so it is. It's all Marty Walsh. And again, to his point, gentrification is going on everywhere, South Boston, but you have to understand, when United Southern Settlements, who left out an entire community that had so many ideas and alternatives, and gives it to the highest bidder and to tear down without
between that statue and the building. And I was aware of what Val was talking about, because that was one of my questions, because you know how one of those programs talks about the way to make society better is to kill all the lawyers. So I know there's 3 or 4 lawyers here tonight, and what Tito told me was that he thought that there was a restrictive covenant that ran with the deed of the Tubman House that would prevent it from being conveyed to a private entity.
their staffers to listen, when they didn't even want to listen to us.
Let me tell you something. You go back and tell
Every
them.
time when they had a
Yes.
meeting,
Yes.
they would make sure that the police is there.
Yeah.
And then people were always, they of course, they would choose to have a black person moderating to pretend that somehow, this is a process that's really being mediated by black folks. But they would have someone to make sure that they censor any black person who would go to any of those meetings. As soon as you try to say something, you would be muzzled up.
Yeah.
If you guys were sitting in attending one of those meetings, first of all, there would be about 1 or 2 police roaming around to intimidate you. They would bring, a few folks that somehow who have drunk the Kool-Aid, that it is the right thing to sell this building, being there to stare people down. It would be a whole different feeling if you guys ever had a chance to attend one of those meetings. But they certainly do not hesitate as we are meeting to send someone. But we do understand that they send someone thinking that in our own meeting that we would be muzzled up. That could never happen. Masharia and the board, they need to come here and then try to muzzle up.
And young man, listen to me. We don't mean to barbecue you nothing, but we're gonna barbecue your boss. Okay? And then we can tell you the reason why. Now, I've been in this community for a little while, I ain't gonna say how long, but when she became president, the first thing I did was go over there. You know what she did? She said, oh, you're gonna have to wait, make an appointment, maybe years from months from now. So that's not reaching out to this community, especially not to me, and I've been going in there ever since I've been over here. So you need to go back and tell her, if she really wants to do something, listen to her. If she really wants to change what she's doing. Because this fight ain't over until we win. And you need to know that.
Everyone has been quiet. Churches, even Frida Garcia, who is someone I adore. I've known her since I was young. For her to sit in front and say that the last time USCS first she started off with the word minority, then she went to black, gave them a building, they turned it into condos. And so I did some research, and I called people who used to work at UCs, and they said, oh, that was Richard Taylor, one of Frida's friends.
Wow.
Now, is Frida, and I am going to approach Frida, is Frida okay with the 5 white guys and a white woman who's about to demolish this building? What they do is they vilify us, they talk bad about us, and people are saying, you want to help them. You want to say, let's partner. Mel King was very clear. But instead of saying, okay, well, let's work together. As a matter of fact, I cannot tell you the many times my boss and our development consultant talk to my Sharia, and when people hear the options that were laid before her, they said she would still make a ton of money. So this is why when you have someone who is not from this community, this is what happens.
And does not want to deal. Because they have people doing, they have a lot of powerful people.
When you have a multi-billion-dollar companies behind you, you're not that broke. And when I found out that they had a multi-billion-dollar team behind them, I thought, how bleeding are you? How close are you to closing your doors when you have a multi-billion-dollar team behind you? Restrictions. HUD has a restriction, and Val Hyman, who's another long-term South End, he knows for a fact. He says, I know for a fact HUD did not give United South End Settlements money for them to turn it around and sell it to a private developer. United Southern Settlements is different than most nonprofits. It was, it came under Massachusetts state legislature, which is very different, so they have different rules. So you do have a lot of people who are in the background looking at the restrictions. You can ask Marty Walsh not to lift. There is a use restriction. You can call Marty Walsh to say, we do not want that use restriction lifted because this community center serves all. I'm on the Claremont Park Association. Nikki Stewart said, no, you can't use it because a USCS staff have to be there. He said, well, our niece is in the building. No, you can't use it because a USCS staff person is there. And so at that moment, I saw, and we all had to squeeze into the concrete house. It was hot, you had a lot of people, and this was to have a discussion about a marijuana dispensary. And I thought, if we can't use, and I had booked the boardroom thinking, okay, I have meetings all the time with outside people. But they've held people hostage. They've told the tenants who are still paying rent, we can't do events anymore. We pay $11,000 a month. We should be able to have events.
For federal funds based on the poverty statistics, but then they will spend them in non-impoverished areas. And I believe this was the situation with Jared Kushner and his application for and receipt of federal funds for housing that didn't go to the people that the housing was supposed to go, that the federal funds intended the housing to go to. That happens all the time, and it happens everywhere. So I try to hold my local jurisdictions accountable for the application for those funds and the application of those funds. We won't see that happening again. And so that means that impoverished communities basically, actually, as I look at this and I think about it, don't let me think about it too long, because it seems to me that in 2016 the Democrats, Hillary, could not win with the voters in place. So now what they'd like to do is exchange us for more compliant voters.
Right. Yes, so true. That's very, very good. Now,
So let's change our condition and sign this petition and put an end to all this suspicion. A Mandela coalition, what we want to see. Mandela, Massachusetts is the place to be. Mandela, Massachusetts. It's a catchy tune, and some members of Boston's Black and Latino community are hoping that it's also a catchy idea that will win votes on the city referendum this fall. This question will allow voters in certain wards and precincts of the city of Boston to consider the issue of becoming independent or remaining a part of the city. The plan, put forth by the Greater Roxbury Incorporation Project, or GRIP, would carve a new municipality out of what some businessmen see as the next frontier for Boston development. As it stands now, the new community, which would bear the name of imprisoned black South African leader Nelson Mandela, would include much or all of the neighborhoods of Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, Jamaica Plain, the South End, and Columbia Point. Although no formal boundary lines have been drawn, one can still glimpse at what Mandela, Massachusetts might include and exclude. For instance, this bridge on Massachusetts Avenue is a likely dividing line. On that side, Boston, with the Massachusetts General Hospital, the Prudential Building, and the Public Library. And on this side, Mandela, with the City Hospital, the Orange Line, and Franklin Park. Being part of Boston used to be okay, but the city used to allocate money our way. Now all that's changed, it's plain to see that the city only cares about property. Not surprisingly, Boston's Mayor Flynn is not thrilled by the notion of giving away such a large chunk of the city he governs, and neither are some black leaders who think minorities are on the verge of gaining more political.
And the presenter was the person who directed the venue, who happened to be a Chinese lady. And she said that the point of her venue or place of operation was to preserve Chinese culture. The second venue that was being promoted was Villa Victoria, which is a venue that is attached to a designated area for Hispanic residents of Boston. Well, one of the many. It's interesting. It's called Villa Victoria, and the African American people who have resided in there, I don't know how many units that they administer, but it's upwards of 300, maybe more, in the South End District of Boston. However, Villa Victoria has a performance space, and that director was presenting at the Boston Foundation event, and she was there with she was Latin, and so was her assistant, and they were both there, and they both said that their purpose was to preserve Latin culture, preserve and present Latin culture. The third presenter was white, and he represented Hibernia Hall, which is located in what is historically known as the Black District of Boston, Dudley Square, the African American District of Boston, Dudley Square. And the first thing that he said was how there were no more African Americans living in Dudley Square, and how Dudley Square was now populated by immigrants. And after he made that statement, I just couldn't hear the rest. I was so outraged. When I mentioned this particular scenario to my friends who live in Dudley Square, who are African American, they were extremely appalled and irate that they have been erased from the map. Actually, what he said was how the African Americans have all moved to the surrounding suburbs and only come into Boston to go to church. I've attended many events at Hibernia Hall, including one that celebrated Nubian notions, in which hundreds of African American people were in attendance, and they were neighborhood people. But we didn't have an African American person representing Hibernia Hall. In fact, the white man who did represent that facility negated our presence in the community totally. So what does that say? It says that Black Americans, the descendants of those who enslaved for this country, our presence has been systematically neglected by those who should be representing us. We didn't have an African American person representing us at Hibernia Hall, and therefore our culture wasn't deemed to be one worthy of preservation. This is a problem.